All right, good morning and welcome to the House Environment Committee. This morning, we are going to hear the changes we made to the CAFO program, or created it last year, I guess, how that's going. And we welcome two guests who I will let introduce themselves.
Good morning. Thank you for having us. I'm Catherine Gessing, General Counsel for the Agency of Natural Resources.
Good morning, Abby Pajak. Thank you for having us. The Concentrated Animal Feeding Operation Program Manager.
So what we thought we'd do first is just walk through some of the changes that are related to CAFOs in H632. Most of those changes were requested by EPA. Unfortunately, they didn't get those changes to us until the end of May last year, so we weren't able to kind of get them into the previous bill, which was Act 67. The changes start on page 17, line 19, and
Sorry, are you in last year's bill? You're in this year's bill.
I'm in this year's bill.
We're going to.
Did you want to go
I
through?
thought you were going to change. Just remind us what we did.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, just maybe high level.
Okay. Yeah,
Remind us what
absolutely.
we did, why we did it.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't mind, that would.
Well, the background is that there was a dedelegation petition, and that was filed by CLF, VNRC, and the Lake Champlain Committee. And as a result of that petition, EPA embarked on kind of an investigation. They did a series of inspections. They convened a group of us, including the petitioners and including ANR to
Can you pause
discuss.
for 1 minute?
Yeah.
I'd like it if you could, what?
I'm trying to
having
get
technical-
onto our committee page. and I'm
Okay.
having
Website's
trouble.
not working.
Yeah,
Okay.
I am too.
All right, so if folks are distracted, I'd rather wait for a minute and.
Just get the bill up. So the other way to get there is all the house calendars. And then today.
Good morning.
It's right here.
Sorry.
Oh, I was sitting first.
Do anybody remember the other way to get to our agenda?
You can just also enter if you get to the main page, just enter H632.
oh, yeah, that's what I do because there's not, they're not on the agenda.
But we're getting background right now. It's not in H632.
Looks like they're sitting next to me.
Everyone seemed to be having the same challenge.
There's another path.
Is everyone ready?
Yep.
Great. Okay, start again.
So as a part of that petition process, EPA and the petitioners and ANR agreed to have ANR submit a corrective action plan to EPA. The first corrective action plan EPA responded to. They kind of said, you're headed in the right direction, but we want some more detail around how you're going to stand up a CAFO program in Vermont. And one of the directives of that corrective action plan is that we would go forward with a legislative initiative that would incorporate more of the sort of CAFO related definitions into Title 10, 47, Chapter 47, which is sort of the water quality section. And there were some tweaks that were also made to Title 6 to kind of align some provisions with the CAFO program. The legislation that resulted was Act 67. It included a number of definitions related to CAFOs. So it included, definitions of concentrated animal feeding operations, large farm operations, medium farm operations. It also provided the Secretary of the Agency of Natural Resources with explicit authority to embark on rulemaking, to conduct inspections, to establish technical standards related to farm operations and that comply with the Federal Clean Water Act. One of the things that EPA was interested in is making sure that we had, that we were sort of proceeding with the program, and that if we had additional tweaks that we could bring those to the legislature. We've been meeting with EPA on a regular basis. We've also met with the petitioners this past month to talk about, what our status is, and we're going to continue to have some of those meetings with them. We have regular check-ins with EPA staff, and they're mostly their technical and legal staff from Region 1. I don't know, do you want any more detail around Act 67?
Let's just see, do folks have questions right now for Catherine?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Thanks for the refresher. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Does everyone have H632 up? It's not, can you check your link? Because what I'm getting is an active webpage, but your link isn't going through from today's post.
Okay.
So I get, here, Michael O'Grady is introduced for
Yeah.
today, but then it goes to a dead end. So-
IT, I'll email IT and see.
Or just try reposting it.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that as well.
Looking at it as introduced.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If you don't have the act up, do you want Abby to sort of start her sort of overview of what we're doing in terms of the CAFO program?
no, I think we're good. I think
You're good? Okay.
just,
Yeah.
we've talked about it. fairly.
Okay, good.
And if you go to as introduced, you can get to it.
So high level, some of these sort of tweaks are really around clarification, corrections to misspellings, those kinds of things. So the first one was on page 17, line 19, and it's in conjunction with an edit that's on page 18, line 19, which just clarifies which permits we're talking about in the ag statutes. There's the text of that section talks about permits that are issued by both the Secretary of Ag and the Secretary of A&R. So it's just a clarification to make sure that the reader knows that it's an LFO or it's a NPDES permit, which is the CAFO permit. The second one is a request to extend a timeline associated with
I think we have a question on the previous one
Yeah.
from Representative
Okay.
Chapin.
So we were just a little concerned on that page 617, right after the LFO clarification, it also crosses out cow/calf and replaces it with cow or calf pairs, which was concerning to us that it might indicate that means like a pair of cows or a pair of calves. We thought that maybe that should be an and.
Okay, I actually don't think that EPA requested that one. That might be a legislative
It was.
council fix, so
Got through with it.
just, yeah,
I think we're looking for clarification from the agency.
yeah.
You mean cow and calf? Like a pair has to be a cow and a calf.
I think it's the total number of animals. So calves and cows, counting both of them.
I don't.
No?
If you
Oh,
could
it's calf.
check with-
Okay,
All
right, we can check.
In the best position to clarify that, that would be helpful. Because it's counting a pair as if it was one.
Yeah. And I certainly will check with ag.
That's, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. I
That's,
think that might be an error somewhere.
Yeah. yeah. So the next change was a request for an extension to the CAFO general permit, and I think Abby will get into this a little bit, but one of the things that's happening right now is that we're engaged in a stakeholder process, and it's been really productive, but it also was not something that was contemplated as part of the original corrective action plan with EPA. They have been really supportive of that process because I think they view it as an opportunity for us to engage the public, both the NGOs and the environmental groups and the farmers. And I will let Abby talk about that more, but we
Yeah, I'll let her.
we have a medium general permit right now. And one of the things that we would like to do is to convert that permit to not just a medium general permit, but a permit that covers all farms. And that's going to require some technical some technical knowledge, some technical, sort of investigation related to compliance schedules and things like that. And so we feel like we need some time to do it right. I don't think that will prevent us from issuing individual permits, but it's the general permit piece that
Is the general permit specific to medium farms?
right now it's specific to medium farms.
But you wanted to cover.
We'd like it to cover both medium and large farms. So, and it would essentially be farms mostly that are, sort of in compliance, but want the coverage to protect against civil suits, for example.
What would
those sorts of
the
things.
need for the individual permit?
Right now, it would be, you would have to have a compliance schedule. It would be, a farm that's more sort of, their operations are maybe a little bit more complicated. There needs to be more detail in the sort of terms and conditions related to that farm. Maybe they need an upgrade for their manure pit, that kind of thing.
Say right now, in the future.
Yeah, in the future, we are sort of thinking about whether we can incorporate some compliance schedules into into a general permit, but that's sort of in process, something that we're sort of thinking about. And, as part of the stakeholder process, Abby's been, inviting other states, and EPA to kind of come to these meetings and talk about their programs and how they're implementing the programs, because there are some differences among states. And we're trying to fashion a program that is a good fit for Vermont and Vermont farms and, the Vermont landscape. So. Let's see. The next change, there's a couple of, the next change is on page 20, it's at line 8, and it really is just an edit, I think, from Ledge Council. At the bottom of the page, there's a 18 and 19 and 21. There are a number of changes that were requested by EPA. They wanted it to be very clear that the secretary would have the authority and the discretion to require a CAFO permit under that section regarding large CAFO permits. And then they also indicated that when nutrient management plans are that are part of a permit are noticed for public review and comment, that it has to be a plan that's approved by the secretary. So it can't just be a draft plan. It's something that we would have had to look at, and that's in the federal regs. So they wanted that clarification. They also asked for a clarification regarding the renewal of permits. on page 21, and I think it's really just, they wanted, it to be clear that a permit would be renewed in accordance to its terms. And then on page 22, stop me if I'm going too fast, but I don't want to use up Abby's time because she has a lot to say. So on page 22 at the top 1 through 10, there were some changes to the language around 2 or more CAFOs under common ownership. That language comes from the federal regulations, and that was requested by EPA. EPA also requested additions on page 22 and page 23, additions to the definitions of large farm operations and large CAFO operations. In our original definition, we didn't have the phrase whether milked or dry. And so they wanted that inserted because it's consistent with the federal regulations and definition. And the same on page 24 for medium farm operations. Originally, we had just referenced the Title VI, but that language is not in Title VI, so they wanted us to put into the statute. So that brings us to page 26. There's a correction to stormwater. I think that's Ledge Council. And there's also on page 27, a tweak to the definition of waters of the United States. I think that's also Ledge Council. Just, sort of streamlines the language. And then on page 28 at the top, 1 through 6 or 1 through 5, EPA wanted us to include some references to the federal regs around technical standards and requiring CAFOs to comply with the federal technical standards. So that was a request that we, put into our initiative. And then further down on that page on line 15, there's a wastewater correction, which is also, I think, Ledge Council. On page 30, under the section of CAFO requirements and exemptions, there's a section that talks about unpermitted large CAFOs and areas that would be considered exempt under the federal regs. And then there's just a clarification that the appropriate utilization of nutrients under a nutrient managed plan has to comply with the federal CAFO regulations. And then on page 31, this was something that was just missed last year. Title 10 VSA 8003 is the section of the statute that deals with the environmental court and enforcement. And so we had some language in last year's bill in Act 67 that directed us to renegotiate and reissue a memorandum of understanding, which we were calling a document that sort of outlined how we do business with the Agency of Ag, how we coordinate inspections and referrals for enforcement, and how we share data, all of those kinds of things. And there's an existing document that has been in place for a while. We also have a draft document that is a little bit more, it's a little more streamlined. We've shared it with EPA and with Ag, but we really wanted to wait until the stakeholder process was completed because there are likely to be some suggestions that come out of that process, and we want to incorporate those kinds of things presented to to the legislature and get some feedback from folks before we kind of finalize that document. Right now, things are going pretty well. We've got regular meetings with ag. We're sharing data that we didn't necessarily share before. We have access to their SharePoint. We're trying to figure out how to get them access to our enforcement section database. So we're working on that right now. So what this section does is just incorporate the same language that was in Act 67 into the environmental court sections. And then I think that might, is that it? Might be it.
That's all on the CAFO, but and then, so I'd like, if two members have questions for general counsel. So thank you for that. It also strikes me that since you're general counsel for A&R, we may have other questions for you on this bill, but I would like to get through the CAFO part of it right now. Thank you.
Thanks.
Sure. So I think I was asked to speak specifically to the MOU and the medium CAFO general permit and the missed deadlines. And Catherine did touch on some of the reasoning, mainly the stakeholder group, which was formed as, as per Act 67, wasn't in our timeline when we proposed the CAP, the corrective action plan to EPA. And the corrective action plan was our best guess of a timeline. Again, we put in dates, ahead of having resources and really knowing where this was going to go. And then the legislature did get involved and we formed the stakeholder group, which has been ongoing. It's been a really, I think, meaningful process. Some of the items that the stakeholder group is touching upon that do affect the MOU and or the medium CAFO general permit, I can outline for you. With the CAFO general permit, EPA asked us kind of, I feel like late in the communications to reissue it. It had been issued, it's issued every 5 years, and it had been issued a few years before that, to expand it for all size farms. And A&R does have some, we support that in some ways, but we also had a lot of conversation we were hoping to have with EPA on what that means and, general permit versus an individual permit. The way that the general permit is written, it's very, it's like you need to have all of your production area in standard and meet the highest sort of standard, meet that 25-year, 24-hour storm event before you apply for it. So it's and it's a voluntary permit, and we haven't had any volunteers to date to apply for that. So the other item that EPA asked us to reopen it for was buffers. They said that Vermont's buffer standards don't meet the federal standards, which again, we've asked them to clarify and have more conversation with us, and we haven't had that. We did meet with EPA yesterday and we said, they are meeting with the stakeholder group on the 29th. And we said, please be prepared to answer buffer questions. That's going to be a big conversation in the state. So to open a voluntary permit that no one has applied for, while we're trying to grow this program and engage in the stakeholder group, when we're talking about limited resources, when we don't have the answers that we need from EPA, who asked us to open it, it's a complicated process. So that's why we asked for a correction in the date for that. And one other thing that's coming up with general versus individual permits in the stakeholder group is farmers are worried about this public notice requirement for a discharge of EPDS permit. And with a general permit, the understanding is that that notice is of the general permit, not potentially an individual farm. So stakeholders are really engaged in what the differences are. We're calling it different states, asking them for that information, and we're really engaged with them. And we think that we'll get at least a suggestion on what stakeholders support, and then maybe the legislature supports for structure. So again, fully committed to expanding the general permit. We're just kind of waiting to see to what extent are we going to extend it and expand it.
Do you want to talk a little bit about staffing?
Yeah.
Because there have been some significant changes.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry.
Let me go over the MOU real quick, and then I'll switch to staffing, and then I think we should talk about the stakeholder group too. So the MOU, again, is a very heavy process document. And I think for us, we did update our authority. It went to the agency of ag. We had our back and forth, and we sent it to EPA, and we're still waiting comment. So it did sort of, the 2017 MOU process was referenced to But without knowing, again, how the agencies are potentially going to interact or what permits we're going to have or how we're going to interact with each other, it was hard to update a process document at this point. So again, we've proposed that we do that after this stakeholder group ends and we sort of have a better idea of which permits, which agency will be, responsible for administering. So yeah.
That's a question along those lines. It struck me going through that you're asking for a date change for that process, but do you have a date certain for the CAFO rules?
No, we have a proposal in the corrective action plan that we submitted to EPA. And we are preparing to begin work on that rule after the stakeholder group commences. That is first and foremost, in my opinion, as program manager, imperative to the success of this program. There are some federal gray areas that we really need to outline in a CAFO rule. And so I think that that's, in my opinion, one of the most important things that we need to do for the program is develop that rule. And we will engage stakeholders as necessary. But I think in the CAP, it's in year 2.
I'm just looking at it. I actually think it's in.
There was no set date. And again, the stakeholder process and sort of figuring out what what's going to happen between the two
Yeah.
agencies, what kind of permit we're going to write.
Yeah, it's, we would start to conduct the outreach on the CAFO rule in this year. So, but the idea is that, and we would commence the rulemaking this year, but it probably will be towards the end of the year.
That you start.
Adoption date in 2027. Yeah.
Well,
So that's the,
I would like to know a realistic adoption date that we can
mhm.
adopt.
Well,
Yes.
I would think it usually takes anywhere from 4 to 8 months to adopt a rule. So,
Give you a 9.
yeah, so, huh?
I appreciate your optimism. But I guess I'd like
Yeah.
to know what y'all, in
So,
terms of how it fits in with your stakeholder process.
yeah, I think part of what we want to do is do a pre-rulemaking outreach process before we do the rulemaking because it is a new program. And so I would think that would start in the fall and then we would try to commence the rulemaking, file the ICAR paperwork towards the end of 2026. So I think what that means is probably end of summer, early fall for the final rule to be adopted by the Secretary of State.
Of 27.
Yeah, 27.
Okay. Representative Chapin.
Can you just describe what the difference would be between a stakeholder process that you're doing now and a pre-rulemaking outreach?
So the stakeholder process is a little bit broader. It was directed by the legislature, and there's a number of criteria that or questions that they want the stakeholders to answer. So they could be things like, are we going to have one LFO permit that is sort of, implemented by A&R? How are we going to, what are the different roles of ag versus A&R, that kind of thing. And that's just one example. We're not predetermining what's going to come out of that stakeholder process. We're asking the stakeholders to give us their input. And then we have a report that we have to provide to the legislature. So it's a much broader process. When we do pre-rulemaking, we'll have a draft of the individual permit that people can react to. So it's like here, or the rule. So here is what we're proposing. It's much more specific. It's
It's not before you make a draft.
Right,
Actually,
right.
you have a draft and then you get input and then you do another draft.
Yeah. And then we start the rulemaking process, having at least gotten some input from folks. And it may, it's not something that we do all the time, but we certainly do it when we either have a new program or we have something that's particularly complicated or a little bit controversial, those kinds of things where we really need people to weigh in and let us know what they think. So,
So just to rewind a minute, see if I understand, I understand that you've sort of started a pre-stakeholder process by meeting sort of separately with farmers and.
the stakeholder process that we're going through right now was directed by.
No, I understand, but can I just finish?
Oh, go
So,
ahead, sorry.
is that true that you sort of started out meeting separately? And then are you coming together? And that's when
Yes.
you're counting the stakeholder process to begin? And where are we at in that process? Do I have that right?
Oh,
I think I can speak to that. So
Yeah.
we did include stakeholders, a smaller group of stakeholders. The farming community, partners, NRCS, technical service providers, agencies. And we did that for the farming community to outside of the environmental groups and EPA. Coming in so that they could get a real understanding of what is being asked of them, because it's a lift and there's a lot of technical standards and conversations that we wanted the farmers to have ahead of getting, you know, the environmental groups in the room with them so that they had that background information. So they are everyone, the environmental groups we have a facilitator that was hired. And so they have been communicating with all stakeholders. Mostly throughout the process. So it wasn't the pre-stakeholder group. It's just sort of the way we decided to structure it with meetings, including some or all of the stakeholders. But now on the 22nd, the environmental groups are going to come in and talk to the farmers. On the 29th, we have a meeting and EPA is going to come in and talk to the rest of the stakeholders. They're going to answer questions, hopefully on buffers, among other things. And then we have 2 public hearings scheduled for the 9th and the 11th, and those are hybrid. So we are moving forward, and I don't think it was a pre-stakeholder. That's how we structured it for everyone's comfort, because again, we're asking really technical and potentially, you know, hard to answer questions such as, you know, how should the 2 agencies interact? You know, ANR is now going to be, it has, you know, expanded their program. We're going to be out there inspecting. We have to propose an inspection schedule as part of this. And so what do stakeholders think about both agencies out there doing that? How should we interact? Which permits are you know, which agency would hold which permit? These are the conversations that we're having in the stakeholder group. So.
Representative North.
Yeah, just a specific question on the discussions around buffering that are currently happening. Do any of those discussions include the concept of how to buffer the output of tile drain? Or if that's included in the buffering discussions?
The group is not proposing at this point changes to tile drain buffers. The EPA brought up specifically buffers on fields for surface water and ditches. They said that doesn't meet the federal standard. So that is the scope. Tile drainage has come up, I'm sure. It comes up often in Vermont right now, but that is the extent of the discussion is what would be acceptable for our permits. Yeah.
It's not included buffering of tile drain outputs currently, the discussion.
There are requirements in the RAPs right now for tile drainage, and both agencies worked on, you know, that together. So that, as far as I understand, is holding and, you know.
In place and not. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Sure.
And not to put you on the spot, but since you're new, we'd love to hear just a little bit about your background and how
Sure.
you got here.
Sure.
All right.
So, yeah, so I am new to ANR. I came over in 2023. I came from the Agency of Ag. I was a water quality inspector there for 19 years. So I'm not entirely new to ag regulation. I've been in the state working in this area for 23 years. So that's my background.
So you worked with the Agency of Agriculture.
Agency of Agriculture.
All those other years, and
I did.
23, you came over to ANR.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
she was a party one for quite a while.
I had
Oh, you have a question,
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't.
No,
mean
no,
to-
go ahead.
2 when I came over, and then the program manager left and assumed that role, and now we're up to, well, I'll share with you a bit, but.
Representative Austin.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, how often does stakeholder input align with best practices, evidence-based back? And what happens if they don't align?
Sorry, I couldn't hear.
I'm sorry, I was asking about, how often does, public input, the stakeholder input align with evidence-based best practices? And if they don't align, what happens?
So I can only speak to the current stakeholder process that we're going through. But we are, realigning. We have a facilitator. We're realigning with scope. So it's like, we're not proposing the proposal wouldn't be anything less than what is federally or state, required. So we're operating within the boundaries of what is appropriate. But it does allow some conversations to happen on what type of permit might allow the most flexibility. And we're also talking about if we're bringing in specific production area standards, similar to New York has a set of production area standards that all farms have to meet. What does that look like? And then we're talking about the resources and the regulatory structure and the technical assistance that farms would need to uphold or bring their production areas to that standard. So we're not talking about changing federal or, state standards. We're just talking about there will be VPDS permits for farms that discharge. How does that look? And then how did the two agencies interact? So we haven't seen the report, but we would follow the rule regardless.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
There are a lot of technical folks on the
Stakeholders.
Yeah.
stakeholders.
Can you give us
It's
a sense
helpful.
of that
Really
stakeholder
helpful.
group, like who's on it, how many?
Sure. There's about, I have a list of it. There's about 30 people that engage in it regularly to date. The environmental groups are in addition to that. We kept it half farmers. So there's a number of large farms, medium farms, and then small farms. Some of them, we tried to find people who wear multiple hats, who are part of the farmers watershed groups, who work for other, entities. We also have NRCS, we have technical service providers, the Agency of Ag, ANR is there. I am missing FSA. So we have a really broad, UVM extension is there. I'm sure I'm missing someone. So it's a really broad group.
That would be helpful to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, sure. And I could provide a list.
No, that's okay.
Yeah,
I
okay,
mean, I'm
yeah,
fine, just.
okay, yeah.
Well, I actually think we should have a list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay,
I'm
sorry.
happy to provide that. Yeah.
And I guess, including the whole environmental groups.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's actually a pretty good website with that shows kind of what the process has been, what the
Link.
agendas
I
and all
will.
of that kind of stuff.
That would be great.
So, yeah,
yeah.
so we can send that along as well.
For sure. Yeah, and we have meeting summaries for every stakeholder group. And we have our presentation PDF'd and up there and any reference documents that we find important. So when we get to the public hearings, we hope that everyone is as informed as they can be on the process. Yeah,
Trying to understand the process. Thank you.
sure.
You want to talk about stuff?
Sure, I can get to program updates. So we've been, when I came on, there were two, and then it went down to one. And about a year and a half ago, we replaced the second member of the CAFO program. That was kind of the time that the cap and all this was being proposed. We were in conversations with EPA. We were given the funding to hire 3 other CAFO program staff. And as of December 15th, we welcomed our 5th member of the program. We're working right now on onboarding their training right now. They're in a training. So we're working on onboarding them, getting them up to speed on doing inspections, figuring out the lay of the land, and then working on getting that capacity up for the 5 people in the program. In the meantime, even with the other staff member and myself, we did work on meeting the requirements that we had proposed in the corrective action plan year 1 with EPA. We did conduct 10 inspections as lead agency. They were done with the Agency of Ag out there. So we did do that. We met that requirement. We also did multiple visits that were not full inspections. So we did some complaints and then joint visits with Agency of Ag. We've been moving forward as far as enforcement, and all of this is sort of touched upon in the corrective action plan. And I'm sort of touching that as we've worked on it. We've continued to advance new enforcement cases for direct discharges and tracking corrective actions required of farms that we've settled with. So continuing on, how we've been moving forward. As far as program development, we're beginning to set up support services for technology and database support. As Catherine mentioned, we're sharing, Agency of Ag is sharing their SharePoint file system with us, and we're working on sharing that back with them. We were given the ability to develop our own dashboards with the Ag Water Quality Database. And so we're waiting till we had a little bit more staff capacity so that we could assign some people to do that. But we are fully committed to sharing that data. And then we're all calling the same structures on farms, the same things, and there's less confusion. So we're really working as we move forward to work more seamlessly with the Agency of Ag. Yeah, that's what we've been up to. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Representative Moore?
Yeah, you mentioned you've done at least 10 formal inspections thus far, and I know you can't give us any specific results from the specific inspections, but just in general, have the early inspections that Ag and are done together, any of just in general kind of colored or shaped the way you're thinking about going forward with the CAFO permitting?
I don't think that we found anything that was surprising. I think, again, the general idea is that there are discharges from production areas in some cases, and that's the reason why we're going to need to develop this VPDS program. It was a drought, so I would say it was a drier than normal year, and inspections are based on day of observations. There was a lot of risk areas. I think part of the CAP that we were asked to focus on was even in scenarios where we don't see a discharge happening, are these areas that would be required, that would pull a farm into the requirement to obtain a VPDS permit. And that's what we're working on, is compiling that data and really focusing on what does that mean? How do we design a program that could pull in some of these, discharges that are happening intermittently, and writing a rule to address that too. So I don't think that we found anything that was surprising. It was an especially dry year, so a lot of risks that we saw.
So risk is a placeholder where you might expect if it was a bigger rain year, you come back and look, or.
Sure. Yes. So the risks run a range from a management area where there's always potentially a risk because the farm needs to maintain it and clean it up. So, say manure doesn't go over curb with a stream or a ditch on the other side of it. And then it can also be something larger, such as there isn't storage or treatment for a silage leachate pond, which sort of drains into an adjacent field. And, those are the areas where we're being asked, I think, in the petition, through this process, to design that program to meet those risk areas. And the federal standard says treat or store, and so we're trying to figure out what that looks like for Vermont. So.
Representative North?
So it sounds like, if my interpretation of what you said is, it sounds like your initial assessment is confirming the path that we put you on.
Yeah.
Not that there's alarm bells like, whoa, we need to go much faster, but just like, yeah, there's some things that it's good that we're doing this.
I would agree.
Okay.
Other questions? Representative Chapin?
You gave some stats about sort of how many inspections you're doing. How about enforcement actions? How has that changed in your, sort of 3 or 5 year tenure? And does a drought year result in just way fewer enforcement actions?
Sure. Well, we just finished our legislative report for this year, and we had about half as many complaint referrals as we do in a normal year. And I assume that's partially because of the drought. I would say, it's hard to compare. I haven't had that many years under my belt here. It does seem like enforcement is fairly regular throughout the years. I wouldn't, just other than the complaints that were received going down, it seemed like a fairly regular year. And I think that was climate specific. So.
Do we have your report yet?
I'm not sure where it went after. I can check on that.
Yeah, I don't see it on our list here yet. See.
So I think it's today, the 15th.
Yeah, it's due today, yeah.
Wait. All right, further questions? Thank you for joining us this
Yeah,
morning.
thank you.
Before we let Catherine off the hook, do members have any questions more broadly on the DEC miscellaneous bill that you can think of right now? Otherwise, I'm sure we can send them to you if we do. Thank you both for coming in this morning.
Thank you for having us. I really appreciate it.
Members will take a 10-minute break and then we'll shift gears.